All right, hello everybody. This is Devin of Defcon Economics back with another video, actually a kind of quick one. This is episode number 9, a primer on inflation. Whether or not you are a newborn, whether or not you are a teenager, mid-20s looking at college, in your 30s working, in your 40s and 50s possibly looking at retirement, or already retired, you feel inflation. It's a part of your everyday experience right now. It's the talk of the town, is it not? So to do my part and to educate people, I'm going to actually go ahead and offer up episode number 9 here, a primer on inflation, and specifically a primer on monetary inflation, as will be the title. So without getting crazy, without getting all off in the weeds, we're just going to define inflation. We're going to look at some videos from some people who know what they're doing. We're going to discuss velocity of money and how that affects inflation, who the Federal Reserve is and what they do, their explanation of inflation, and we're going to watch something at the end that I think really brings it home and drives it home. So first of all, pardon if you hear my dogs or my cat or my kids, any of it in the background. Hopefully you do not. I just happen to have an extremely loud family. I do apologize. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let us please get into it. So this is Investopedia. I use them frequently. They do a good job just talking about financial jargon in articles and simplifying it without getting lost in weeds. And I'm going to try to do the same. And I apologize if my occasional sips of water are a little bit annoying. I have to do it to stay at a good clip for you guys. Having said that, let's get right into it. In a purely economic sense, inflation refers to a general increase in price levels due to an increase in the quantity of money. The growth of the money stock increases faster than the level of productivity in the economy. The exact nature of price increases is the subject of much economic debate, but the word inflation narrowly refers to a monetary phenomenon in this context. Now down here, it talks about deflation, which we're not going to really get into right here because we just want to talk about inflation, keep it all centered around that, and I will do a separate video for you on inflation. So here we go. Key takeaways. Central banks today primarily use inflation targeting in order to keep economic growth steady and prices stable. With a 2 to 3% inflation target, when prices in an economy deviate, the central bank can enact monetary policy to try and restore that target. In other words, if inflation is exceeding 2 or 3%, the central banks can use their monetary policy actions to reel in inflation, is what that is saying. I don't necessarily agree. That's just what it's saying. If inflation heats up, raising interest rates or restricting the money supply are both contractionary monetary policies designed to lower inflation. Tapering is pretty much the universal word for restricting the money supply for anybody wondering. Okay, so we just got a nice quick little definition of monetary inflation. Okay, again, that was Investopedia. Now let's move over here to whatismoney.info. I just thought this was a nice little article that went off or on the same tangent as these guys, but I thought it was great because it discusses it a little bit more interestingly. So let's talk about it. We hear talk of inflation constantly in financial news and economic textbooks, but rarely do we find the distinction made between price inflation and monetary inflation. Understanding this difference is key to understanding how our money works and how the modern day compares to many enlightening episodes throughout history. Price inflation means a rise in price for goods and services. This is the inflation we are familiar with. When we talk about a McDonald's hamburger steadily increasing in price over the decades, we are talking about price inflation. Prices are denominated in units of money, like dollars or ounces of gold. I like that whoever wrote this said that. Good job. Monetary inflation means an increase in the supply of money. When a central bank like the Federal Reserve, who we will touch on at the very end, or a European Central Bank lower interest rates, do quantitative easing or otherwise increase liquidity, they are increasing the supply of money and causing monetary inflation. Monetary inflation matters, and I would say to you, because it can cause price inflation. Price inflation occurs when money is a good with supply and demand, just like a hamburger. If the supply of money increases, the value of each unit of money decreases, which puts pressure on prices for all goods to rise. Let's read that one more time. If the supply of money increases, the value of each unit of money decreases, which puts pressure on prices for all goods to rise. So in other words, the more currency, not money, the more currency is floating out there. So you hear about spending bills, you hear about these kind of bills, you hear about infrastructure bills, all sorts of bills. That's increasing the supply of the money, okay? If the supply of money increases, then the value of each unit of currency decreases. So the US dollar, the supply of it is being increased and the value of each unit out of it is decreasing. That's not good. We don't want that, which puts pressure on prices for all goods to rise. Okay, so now we kind of have an idea of why it matters. So let's watch a quick video from Mike Maloney's Hidden Secrets of Money, Episode 1. Huge shout out to the Gold Silver team, to Mike Maloney, to all the people who work with him, to Jeff Clark, everybody, that whole team. You guys have done just an amazing job. Now, without any further gushing, let's watch this quick video.
Friedman's definition. Inflation is an expansion of the currency supply. Deflation is a contraction of the currency supply. If you expand the currency supply, eventually prices will rise. And if you contract the currency supply, eventually prices will fall. This is a pool, but it's not a pool of water. This is the currency pool. And these are prices. And if you expand the currency supply, prices like a sponge in water have to rise to suck up the excess currency. Governments never stop printing more currency and adding currency to circulation. Therefore, prices keep on going up, not because the stuff that you're trying to buy is changing. The real estate doesn't change. What has changed is the currency purchases less and less. It's the currency going down, not prices going up.
The truth is, what we have that makes our world work right now is a big story. None of it's real. It's all just promises. And if you think about it, that's how currency began to work in the beginning. You know, before we had currency, we had barter. I'll give you 3 coconuts and you give me 4 fish, because that's kind of a fair exchange on coconuts to fish. But that got complicated, so we had to invent this thing called money to be a divisible, portable medium of exchange. And the challenge is that we lost that a long time ago when we lost having things of value be our currency. And now we have this thing called numbers and accounts. But trust me, it is not real. It's a big made-up story.
All right, more on that big made-up story at the end. And that will also be coming from Mike Maloney. Okay, I want to note to anybody listening to or watching this video that video there that we just watched, that short bit, was from 2013, or let's see, almost 10 years ago. How accurate does that sound to you? Worth thinking about. Okay, now we're going to discuss velocity of money, which is something that I feel like is probably not discussed nearly enough at all, anywhere. So velocity of money is important because the velocity describes how fast a unit of currency and money might make their way through an economy, whether that's from you tipping your waiter, whether that is from the gas attendant taking his paycheck and going and paying rent and then buying some food and maybe taking his girlfriend to a movie. All of that involves velocity of money. It involves the exchange of currency, okay? And again, we don't have money, we have currency these days. A currency doesn't have to be a long-term store of value. Money does. I will always harp on that in all my videos. So, having said all that, let's just jump right into Investopedia's definition of velocity of money. The velocity of money is a measurement of the rate at which money is exchanged in an economy. It is the number of times that money moves from one entity to another. It also refers to how much a unit of currency is used in a given period of time. Simply put, it's the rate at which consumers and businesses in an economy collectively spend money. The velocity of money is usually measured as a ratio of gross domestic product, GDP, to a country's M1 or M2 money supply. And here in the key takeaways, let's go over those. Velocity of money is a measurement of the rate at which velocity of money is a measurement of the rate at which money is exchanged in an economy. The velocity of money equation divides GDP by money supply. The velocity of money formula shows the rate at which 1 unit of money supply currency. Wow. The velocity of money formula shows the rate at which 1 unit of money supply currency is being transacted for goods and services in an economy. Wow, I'm sorry about that. That was a mouthful. In other words, it just shows the rate at which a dollar is moving from you to another person and to another person and to another person. I don't know why they jargonize it. Yes, I do, actually. And that's why we're doing what we're doing today. So the velocity of money is typically higher in expanding economies and lower in contracting economies. Okay. So I thought it was really interesting to just quickly brush over a point. Some people say that the velocity of money has nothing to do with that there's no velocity, so there's no inflation, which I tend to disagree with. I think that if you increase the money supply, eventually that will make its way out into the real world, no matter what you do, no matter how many debt instruments you create, no matter how many reverse repos you do. Eventually, the excess liquidity spills over. So I just wanted to make that point. So again, the velocity of money is how fast a single unit of currency or many units of currency are changing hands. And that's important because inflation has to do with that, okay? If inflation will be higher if there is a higher velocity of money, okay? And we just kind of went over what that was. But don't take it from me, take it again from Mike Maloney, who will discuss it for you. This will be a little bit longer, but that's okay, it's worth it.
Inflation. And after I'm done with the book, we're going to come back and we're going to look at some data so that you get a full understanding of what velocity of currency is and how it affects you. So, on page 16, we have, at the beginning of World War I, Germany went off the gold standard and suspended the right of its citizens to redeem their currency, the mark, for gold and silver. Like all wars, World War I was a war of and by the printing press. The number of marks in circulation in Germany quadrupled during the war. Prices, however, had not kept up with the inflation of the currency supply, so the effects of this inflation were not felt. The reason for this peculiar phenomenon was because in times of uncertainty, people tend to save every penny, and World War I was definitely a time of uncertainty. So even though the German government was pumping tons of currency into the system, no one was spending it, yet. But by war's end, confidence flooded back along with the currency that had been on the sidelines, and the ravaging effects worked their way through the country as prices rose to catch up with the previous monetary inflation. Just before the end of the war, the exchange rate between gold and the mark was about 100 marks per ounce. But by 1920, it was fluctuating between 1,000 and 2,000 marks per ounce. Retail prices shortly followed suit, rising by 10 to 20 times. Anyone who still had the savings they had accumulated during the war was bewildered when they found it could only buy 10% or less of what it could just a year or two earlier. Then, all through the rest of 1920 and the first half of 1921, inflation slowed, and on the surface the future was beginning to look a little brighter. The economy was recovering, business and industrial production was up, but now there were war reparations to pay, so the government never stopped printing currency. In the summer of 1921, prices started rising again, and by July of 1922, prices had risen another 700%. This was the breaking point, and what broke was people's confidence in their economy and their currency. Having watched the purchasing power of their savings fall by 90% in 1919, They knew better this time around. They were smarter. They had been here before. All at once, the entire country's attitude toward currency changed. People knew that if they held onto their currency for any period of time, they'd get burned. The rising prices would wipe out their purchasing power. Suddenly, everybody started to spend their currency as soon as they got it. The currency had become a hot potato, and no one wanted to hang on to it for a second. Now, on the next page, I talk about the front page of the New York Times 1923, and I reference some information there. And I just happen to have a reprint of the front page of the New York Times from 1923. And there's an article here about the German hyperinflation. But what I find more interesting than that is the entire paper is this wonderful time capsule. And if you replaced the names and dates and names of countries and so on in most of these articles, it would all be pertinent today. You'd think that you were reading today's newspaper. But when it comes to this article on the German hyperinflation, it talks about these paper mills pumping out 45 billion marks per day. Now, this is the February edition of the New York Times. By November, those paper mills were pumping out 500 quadrillion marks per day. So now we're going to
Okay, so I wanted to stop it there and move it ahead, but I thought it was important that you get that initial bit there and you get to see what happens. I'm not jumping it forward that far. Actually, you know what? Let's just let it play right where it is. I think it's perfect.
take a look at velocity and how it could affect us in the future. So this is me. Now, I developed this keynote presentation to make understanding velocity easy. Most economists make it sound really complex and people don't think they can understand it. But stick with me, I think you'll enjoy this. When you're measuring velocity, you're measuring the number of times each unit of currency changes hands. I'm going to have lunch and I'm going to pay the waiter, I'm going to tip him $1. And then he parked in a red zone that morning, so his car got towed. He's going to have to take a cab home, and he's going to pay that cab driver that same dollar when he gets to his destination. Then later on that day, the cab driver is going to have to fill his cab with gas, and he's going to use that same dollar again as part of the payment to pay for his tank of gas. So that dollar was used in 1, 2, 3 transactions. It had a velocity of 3 that day. In other words, $1 bought $3 worth of goods and services. Now we're going to kick this up a notch, and we're going to call this a country of 10 people, this economy of just 10 people, and their currency supply is $1. That's the only dollar that exists. And it circulates once, and so you've got $1 times a velocity of 1 equals a GDP, the size of the economy, is $1. If it circulates twice, it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So $1 times a velocity of 10, or 10 transactions, equals a $10 GDP, the health of that economy. Now, if you expand the currency supply, we've given each one of these people $1. If they all make a transaction, there has now been 10 transactions, but each dollar was only involved in one of them. So it's a currency supply of $10 times 1 transaction each equals a $10 GDP. So even though you've got 10 times the currency supply, the economy has the same vibrance. There was 10 transactions, it equals $10. Then we have a second transaction, a third, a fourth. This could be a healthy economy. It could also be an economy running into hyperinflation. Keynesians, that's the type of economists that are running the modern day economy, believe that you can create a healthy economy by changing this figure here, the size of the currency supply. So the Federal Reserve thinks that by adding currency to the economy, that they're going to be able to stimulate it and make the economy grow. And the thing is, it isn't the quantity of currency, it's the amount of goods and services that are created in that country that determines the country's level of prosperity. So if you just add a bunch of currency, all it's going to do eventually is drive up prices. Velocity will slow at first, and that's what we're seeing now. Well, the same thing happened in Weimar Germany. This is the entire hyperinflation from the beginning of World War I in 1914 until the end of 1923. And most economists are attracted to this big hyperinflation on the end. But one thing I discovered when I was writing my book is that there's almost always a pre-hyperinflation hyperinflation. And we see one here, where there's this rise of prices and quantity of currency, and then it levels off for a little while, and then rises again. And this has to do with the psychology. This is the time where I said those people had been there before and experienced that. I'm going to zoom up on it. And so here you see the currency supply increasing. So they're doing monetary inflation, but prices stay level, and the price of gold actually dropped toward the end of the war. But as soon as the anxiety is lifted from the population and they start feeling better, all of that currency comes out of hiding and people start making transactions, and velocity picks up, and prices, and the price of gold especially, just rose dramatically and then leveled off some 16 times higher than they were originally. Notice that the currency supply is growing at a certain rate. The prices are delayed, and then bam, they rise to meet it and exceed it, and then stabilize to account for that quantity of currency. Now back to...
Okay, so I don't want to take too much longer in the video, because honestly I could watch any Mike Maloney video for any length of time over and over again. They're just really well done. He is a fantastic presenter, and he is because he has had to be. You should actually look into the fact that he used to be dyslexic. Not a lot of people know that. So he discussed a lot of different stuff there, but specifically the velocity of money. So we got a real good primer there. All right, guys, we're going to end this episode by going over some quick things. This is the federalreserve.gov, so their government website, explaining what they do. I'm not going to get crazy into it. We're just going to go over the listed items. So, number one, overview of the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve performs 5 key functions in the public interest to promote the health of the U.S. economy and the stability of the U.S. financial system. The 3 key system entities, the Board of Governors, the Federal Reserve Banks, and the Federal Open Market Committee work together to promote the health of the U.S. economy and the stability of the U.S. financial system. Number 3, conducting monetary policy. The Federal Reserve sets U.S. monetary policy to promote maximum employment and stable prices in the U.S. economy. 4, promoting financial system stability. The Federal Reserve monitors financial system risks and engages at home and abroad to help ensure the system supports a healthy economy for U.S. households, communities, and businesses. 5. Supervising and regulating financial institutions and activities. The Federal Reserve promotes the safety and soundness of individual financial institutions and monitors their impact on the financial system as a whole. 6. Fostering payment and settlement system safety and efficiency. The Federal Reserve works to promote a safe, efficient, and accessible system for U.S. dollar transactions. 7. Promoting consumer protection and community development. The Federal Reserve advances supervision, community reinvestment, and research to improve understanding of the impacts of financial services, policies, and practices on consumers and communities. Okay, so that's directly from the horse's mouth. This is our central bank, the Federal Reserve. This is basically what they do. Their 1 to 7 step explainer. Okay, so we have federalreserve.gov, their 1 to 7 step explainer from the central bank themselves. Let's pop over to what is inflation and how does the Federal Reserve evaluate changes in the rate of inflation. Alrighty, guys. Inflation is the increase in the prices of goods and services over time. Inflation cannot be measured by an increase in the cost of one product or service, or even several products or services. Rather, inflation is a general increase in the overall price level of the goods and services in the economy. Federal Reserve policymakers evaluate changes in inflation by monitoring several different price indexes. A price index measures changes in the price of a group of goods and services. The Fed considers several price indexes because different indexes track different products and services, and because indexes are calculated differently. Therefore, various indexes can send diverse signals about inflation. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say that that just sounds like they're taking other people's words for it and telling you what they think is going on. I'm not saying that's what is going on. Again, federalreserve.gov. This is from the horse's mouth, their own website, their own words. I personally would be a little bit skeptical of anybody who said that's how they were doing it. All right, guys, let's get to this last little bit here.
Create checkbook money when they grant a loan simply by adding new deposit dollars in accounts on their books in exchange for a borrower's IOU. These are nothing but numbers that the banks type into their computers. And even though these bank credit IOU numbers are very different from base currency numbers because they only exist in computers, they are still currency. So now there is $190 in existence. Now, the reason people take out loans from the banks is to buy something. They're going to buy a house or a car or something like that. So the borrower takes the $90 that the bank loaned to him from your account, and he pays the seller of the item. But then the seller deposits that currency into his account, and his bank loans out 90% of that and leaves bank credit numbers in its place. So now there's $271 in existence. This process repeats and repeats until under a 10% reserve ratio, an initial deposit of just $100 can create up to $1,000 of bank credit, all backed by $100 of vault cash, just 10%. But as I said, reserve ratios vary wildly. On some deposits, it's 10%, on others, it's 3%, and on some forms of deposits, reserve requirements are 0. The result is that the expansion of the currency supply by the banks is far greater than even this example would lead you to believe. So once again, when currency is deposited in the banks get to lend it out, and then it gets redeposited and relent, redeposited and relent, redeposited and relent over and over again, creating bank credit all the way. This is where the vast majority of our currency supply comes from. In fact, 92 to 96% of all currency in existence is created not by the government, but here in the banking system.
Okay, I want to pause momentarily and just point out that this is part of where inflation comes from, the fractional reserve lending system. One more time, the fractional reserve lending system. It allows banks to take a certain percentage of your cash, put it in the vault, the rest they get to lend out. All right, let's continue onward.
Now, massive amounts of currency spewing into society may at first sound like a fun idea. That is, until you remember one of the most important hidden secrets of money from episode 1, that the prices of everyday goods and services act as a sponge on an expanding currency supply. The more currency we have, the more prices rise. This is where inflation comes from. The true definition of inflation is an expansion of the currency supply. Rising prices are merely the symptom. So our entire currency supply...
Okay, guys, I wanted to stop it there and point out that now we have a really good primer on inflation, right? Where the currency is coming from, who is in control of our currency, what is inflation? It refers to a general increase in price levels due to an increase in the quantity of money. Okay, so that sounds pretty accurate between Investopedia and Mike Maloney, as well as the Federal Reserve. I mean, between those three, we've got a pretty good understanding of the definition. So basically, they're printing a whole heck of a lot of the dollar. And that is causing inflation with these huge trillion-dollar bills. Yes, that is trillion with a T, a capital T, 3.5 trillion and 1.2 trillion dollar bills. So, and those are bills not in the sense of dollar bills, those are bills in the sense of government spending bills, which are actually scarier. So now I just want to finish this video off without making it too long by just saying this, guys. I wanted to do this video for anybody who needs a primer on inflation. You need a couple different resources to look at and go over, and maybe you thought inflation had more to do with tires and balloons and didn't know that it has a whole heck of a lot to do with money as well. And there's a reason for that. And I will be doing another video entitled basically the solution to inflation. Although I may come up with a different title, don't hold me to it, guys. So anyway, this video is dedicated to Miss G again, who really got me thinking about ways to get this simplified, get this out there. I was hoping I could make it like a 20-minute video. I realized it was not going to go there. It was going to be either a 30 to 35-minute video. So I'm going to really try to keep it below 35. Having said that, guys, if you like what you hear, if you like what you see, if you like anything at all about this video, please like and subscribe. If you think there's something I need to do better, if there's something you don't need to hear about, if there's something you want to hear more about, please comment and let me know, and I will try to get a video done about it. This channel is dedicated solely to education and getting experts on the channel who actually know what they're talking about to get you solutions. So, all right, guys, I'm really glad I got this video done. It's been bugging me. I wanted to get it done for you guys. It felt so very important. So if you've been with me since the beginning, thank you so much for being here with me for this episode number 9, a primer on inflation. Thank you guys so much. This has been Devin of Defcon Economics, and I am signing off.